Hey there. Thanks for tuning in. You ready for another episode of My Bigfoot Sighting? Alright then, let's do this.
Seen a bunch of rundown no-horse towns where the church is the backbone, love's in the plow, and the five-string melodies grooving, with the farmland roads where the roots run deep, beyond the noise of the busy streets, where the songs of the South are soothing. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Yeah.
If you'd like to be able to listen to the show without ads and have full access to bonus content, that's an option. To find out how, please go to mybigfootsighting.com.
Right there past that, it's called Hemlock Grove. It's on the left. But anyway, there's poles there, and there's a road that goes down and crosses up. Well, I've heard my dad talk about this place before, and I've been up there actually personally myself, because back in the day, my dad has got a Jeep, and every weekend we Jeep rode all up in on the backside of that mountain down on the river where my experience happened and stuff for years until Big South Fork moved in and shut her all down. But anyway, in my mind, I know where this sound's coming from. It ain't a half a mile away. So we're sitting there and we don't hear it no more. It gets quiet. And so that time she's at the point she's ready to go home. I said, no, let's get in the truck. I said, somebody's camped up here and that's what we've heard. We get in my truck, I back out and I go up the road. Well, like I said, just a little bit up there's that spot. And then you go past the Hemlock Grove. I've got the windows down. I don't hear anything. And I go up there and I know where all these camping spots are on the left along the creek. Nobody's there. I get up to the first campground on the right. I go around the loop. Nobody there. I go to the second campground on the left. Go around the loop. Nobody there. At this time, I'm thinking, I know I'm not crazy. And so I downplay it. I said, honey, it's okay. I said, let's go back. Heck, it's getting late. This time it's 11 o'clock. So anyway, we go back. We get there. She's uneasy. And I said, oh, well, don't worry about it. I'm going to build this fire up. And I did. Our tent ain't probably 8 feet from it, from that little round pit thing. And then I've got those solar lights that's in a rope like deal. And, you know, the old timers say the snake wouldn't cost a rope or a line or whatever. And he sent that up there for my wife to kind of ease her, you know, because she's terrified of snakes. So we get back there and I tell her, look, I'll stoke up the fire and, you know, everything will be all right. So I get this thing roaring. And the whole time this is going on, I keep thinking about the shoes. I still can't figure out this. And I know in her mind, she's thinking the same thing. Plus, what's this screaming a half mile up the road on the same side of the road that we're on? So I get her calmed down. I get in and get her sleeping bags ready, and we crawl in there and we're laying there. And I started hearing sounds across the creek, and I can't explain them. I've had bears to bluff charge me within 5 feet. I'm talking a 450-pound bear bluff charge me. And good thing I didn't turn and run, because if it killed me, I stood my ground and throwed something at it, hit it right under the chin, right in the breast, and it turned around and run off. It was way bigger than me. I'm 6'3", go 250 pounds, but it turned and run. So I'm hearing something across the creek and it can't figure it out. It's a ruh, ruh. And she says, hon, what's that sound? And I keep hearing it. And I said, oh, it's probably a bear. That's what it is, a bear. But I've heard bears make this sound. So we're there, you know, and I keep hearing it. It never will come across the creek. But I'm telling you, this thing does this all night long. It'll go down the creek and back up the creek, but it's just a real deep, but it's real low, and it's almost like a vibrate. Ruh, ruh. And so then it gets quiet. But anyway, I'll get into the story. You keep hearing it. I doze off. She's terrified, and she don't go to sleep. I guess I was asleep. You'd have to ask her 20, 30 minutes. She hits me in the chest with everything she's got. Man, I come up out of that sleeping bag thinking, oh my God, what is it? She said, there's somebody out. I can hear them talking. I can't make out what they're saying, but it's like they're whispering. They're behind the tent. And before that, let me touch on one little thing for her real quick. It was real funny. She loves whippoorwills. And she got up there at night. She said, oh, I wish we could hear one. Finally, we heard one up there at that graveyard. And I don't know if there's anything to this or not, because they talk about how these things can make all kinds of sounds. So this thing comes down. I guess it really was a whippoorwill. It ain't 5 feet from our tent all night long. And I got a pistol. I'm about to blow this thing away. I can't sleep. It's making its whippoorwill sounds, and I'm laughing. She's laughing. But anyway, go to sleep. She hits me in the chest and says, "Hun, somebody's out back of the tent." And right behind the tent, there's a walk trail where people walk down through there to trout fish. So I'm sitting there and I hear something. I can't make it out, but it hears like something walking. I get my headlamp on. I tear out of the front of that tent and go to the left, and I go running down that trail with my flashlight. She's screaming, "Get back, get back." I go running down there probably about 40 yards, and I'm thinking, you're an idiot. Only thing I've got on is a pair of ball shorts, and I'm cold because I just had a pair of ball shorts on under the sleeping bag. I run down there, and I'm shining around. I can't see anything. And I start thinking, you're stupid. She's screaming, "Get back, get back." So I'm walking up there, and I could hear something to the right, but it's just a little bitty old thing. I couldn't tell if it was between me and the road, which the road wasn't 20 yards from me, if it's on the other side of the road. And it could have been my mom playing tricks. And sometimes it can, if you hear sounds and you'll let your mind run. But there's two different things from when you hear something and when you see something. I get back to the tent. I crawl in there. It's, I think 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning. I can't go to sleep. She's out of it. And I keep hearing this thing pace up and down to the left of me across the creek. Whippoorwill ain't there no more. It gets quiet. And this thing keeps going back and forth, making those sounds. And then finally I fall asleep and then wake up the next morning, and the shoes are still there, and we're both, and she's ready to get the heck out of there. I've never seen her move that fast. She's throwing stuff back the truck. I said, let's roll it up. No, throw it in there. We'll lay something on it. Anyway, we get out of there. But before that happens, I go down and look. These shoes are still there. Don't know where they come from, but I promise you on everything that I love, these shoes were not there when we pulled in. How they got there, I do not know. But I went down there and I couldn't get across the creek. The creek's only probably 12, 15 feet wide at the most. It was like sandy, but I couldn't see nothing. But probably about 4 or 5 feet from the sand, there's kind of a little washout where you can see if anybody knows what I'm talking about, like how the vines and the roots of the trees will stick out where the water's washed it out. And right above that, you couldn't really tell anything. I was actually wanting to go across the creek, but my wife's over here saying, "No, can we please just go?" So anyway, we get in the truck and we leave, and we go back. And like I said, this was in 2019. And I'm going to touch on one more thing with my wife. So 2 years ago, if anybody knows where Lake Cumberland's at, we're over there late one night, just hanging out, going to build a fire and stuff there. We're looking up at the night sky, and I'm not lying. I know she's seen it before I did, but we'd seen a satellite go by and a couple of fallen stars, this or that. But she hit me and said, "Look up." She said, "Hon, what is that?" And I looked up, and I'm not lying. Here was a triangle. It was blacker than the night sky. It blacked out the stars. This thing was huge. I don't know how high it was. I know it couldn't have been over 5,000 feet. No sound, absolutely nothing. And this thing is right over top of our heads, and I'm watching it. And as it keeps going, if you look across where I was at, you can see the lights of Russell Springs, Kentucky. It's across Lake Cumberland. Well, I'm watching that thing head that way. No sound, probably maybe 5,000 feet off the ground. And we're watching it, and I can't believe what I'm seeing. It's a triangle shape, blacker than the night sky. You couldn't tell how thick it was, but had 3 distinct little lights on the back. but they wasn't real bright. And we watched this thing go plumb out of sight. We're standing there, and she's looked at me and said, "What is that?" And I said, "Well, I have no idea, hon." I said, "But I know what I seen. Do you know what you seen?" She said, "Yes, I do." I said, "Well, there you go." I don't know what to say about that, but I was trying to keep these in row as I was getting older, but there was one I skipped over. Okay, it was after the ordeal at the river when I was 7 or 8 years old. I got up to be probably, I'm going to say around 11 or 12 years old. And me and my dad go up in the general area where I'm talking about, this creek, but it's the lower end. They call it the lower end and the upper end. Well, there's this spot that we've went to for years up there and hunted. All my family, my grandpa on my mom's side, on my dad's side, all my uncles on both sides have all hunted up here. Well, we're walking up this logging road, and I've got a little 410, and my dad's got a 12 gauge, and we're walking up this road, and he said, "All right, son," he said, "you stand here," and he said, "I'm going to walk on up this road." He said, "You stand here for at least 20, I'm pretty sure he said 20 or 30 minutes. And he said, then I want you to sneak up through there." I said, "Okay, Dad, I'll do that." So I'm watching my dad, and I always done everything. I mean, if it where he stepped, I'd step, because he'd teach you that in the woods. If you're like squirrel hunting, you'd always try to step where they are to keep the noise down. But he's in that old road. I'm watching him ease up through there. Okay. He gets on up through there, and I don't know if I stood there for, well, now thinking back on it, I was there for a while, because when I finally made it to him, he said he was wondering why it took me so long. But now I'll jump back to when this all started happening. I'm standing there, and I started getting scared because I'm thinking about what happened on the river. Well, I'm thinking, well, I'm bigger now. I got a shotgun and this, and that's a 410. And then all of a sudden, my dad told me, he said, "Son, don't leave the road." And we always had a signal, "Son, if you get lost, just whistle, and I'll whistle back." I said, "Okay." I'll whistle. Nothing. And this is, I'm telling you, you could ask my dad. I told him the same thing. And when I reach him, I'm crying. I'm freaked out. I whistle again the second time. I hear a whistle to the left. Well, down to the left, it's a little drop off an ivy thicket, and it goes up on the side going toward a ridge, but it wasn't real high. And I thought, what? He said he was going up the road. And so I sat there a second, didn't hear nothing holler, scream, or nothing like that. And I whistled again. It whistled right back. And that was always communication. "Son, don't holler in the woods, don't talk, whistle." And I said, "Okay." I whistled the third time. This thing whistles back. So I'm thinking, well, he said he was going there. Well, he's over here, so I'm going that way. I go down off the road and work my way through an ivy thicket, get up there, and I'm starting to get scared, because it's in the afternoon. It ain't getting dark yet, but it's in the afternoon. I'm only 12 years old, and I'm getting scared. So I start whistling more, and I swear to you, to my left up on that hill, this thing would whistle back. But in my mind, I keep thinking, "Son, you're supposed to be in that road." So I'm walking parallel with the road, probably about 40, 50 yards off the road, just on the other side of this ivy thicket. I'm walking up through there. I whistle, it whistles back. I keep walking, I stop, I whistle, it whistles back, but it's always to my left. Seems like it was just 40 yards away from me. I couldn't see it because, like I said, this ridge wasn't high, but whatever it was not on the top of the ridge that I could see. So I'm looking, and I don't see nothing. So at this time, I'm starting to tear up and cry. I'm lost. I'm thinking, I'm lost. My dad's whistling. Why ain't he coming to me? But I keep thinking in the back of my mind, I know he went up that road. Why is he up here? I keep walking forward. I walk another 20, 30 feet. I whistle again. Same thing. It whistles. Well, we've talked after this and everything, and hours went on. And he's wondering, why ain't I coming up this road? I ain't in the road. I'm in the woods to the left. I keep walking up there parallel in the road, And Dad, I guess where he'd walked up through there, heck, he probably got 200 yards up in front of me. I keep walking, seems like forever. I whistle, this thing whistles. I whistle, this thing whistles. By this time, I'm crying hysterically. And I keep going straight, though. I'm still parallel to the road, still ain't climbed no higher on the hill. And I get up there and I whistle. I hear this thing whistle, and then I hear a whistle to my right, like a bobwhite. And I knew that was my dad. But wait a minute, what's this here? Who's whistling here? When my dad whistled like that, I heard him and I knew it was my dad. So I kind of get going up through there, and then I stop and I whistle again. I hear another whistle to my left. My dad replies with the same whistle. This time it's closer. So then I pick up my pace. I'm not running, but I'm not walking either. I'm at a jog, 12 years old with the 410, with the squirrel sack like vest on my back. And I get up there and I stop again. And I made, this time when I made my whistle, my dad answered with the bobwhite whistle again. And he ain't 50, 60 yards from me. But this time, this whistle wasn't straight up the hill to me on the ridge. It was behind me. And at that time, man, I broke the run to my dad. When I got to my dad, I was crying hysterically. I said, Dad, I was whistling. Why wasn't you answering me? He said, son, I've only whistled twice. I said, Dad, I've been whistling my head off. I've been whistling forever. I said, you kept answering me over here. He said, son, I never left the road. I said, Dad, something's up here whistling. And so I can see it gets my dad's attention. And I'm crying hysterically and stuff. And I keep saying, Dad, why wouldn't you answer? And because I'm to him, I know he's in the road, and my mind's thinking, well, why am I hearing this over here? And I keep telling him that we never seen nothing or anything like that. But I've always heard, if anybody listens to these stories, a lot of them like I do, and you got to believe the people because they have nothing to gain like I do. For years, I've wanted to talk about this stuff, but I've tried to talk to a few of my friends, and you get the same thing, the rolling of the eyes. You're crazy. Yeah, Bigfoot, whatever. Well, let me tell you something. Until you've had the encounter that I've had, I'm not saying this whistle deal was a Bigfoot. I don't know. But I've listened to programs where they say, especially the Indians, whistling to try to draw you deeper in. But like I said, when I started out, I was whistling. My dad wouldn't reply, but it did to the left. And I done it 3 times till I finally left the road. But like I said, I kept thinking, your dad's on the road. Why are you over here? So I know in my head to kind of follow the road, but I would go a short distance and whistle, but this whistle stayed parallel with me to the left on the hill or just over the hill. I couldn't see it. So anyway, that story, get up there to him. I done told you I was crying hysterically, and we've talked about this for years. I don't understand it. Okay, this was in, let's see, Taylor County, Campbell County area. If anybody knows about Pikes Ridge, it's a ridge. It's 7 miles long that the Green River wraps around. All right, there's a parking gate, and you can't drive nothing out there. You got to hoof this thing. It's up and down where a gas line runs out through there too. But if anybody's ever hunted that, it's up and down, up and down. Well, back this side of that, this has been a few years back, there was 3,150 acres. And being a bunch of my buddies had permission to hunt this land. I've hunted out that Pikes Ridge forever and nothing. I would go out there in the morning at 4 o'clock, stay all day in my stand and walk back at night, not get back to camp 10:30, 11 o'clock. And everybody would always say, man, we was worried about you. You're crazy. Why are you doing that? But I had it all to myself, and I always killed very nice deer out there. But this place I'm hunting here, it had a nickname. It was called Wildcat Ridge. There was this old man, his name was Russ, and back then, gosh, he was 90-something year old. And he was the caretaker of it. And these people that owned the land was out of Ashland, Kentucky. They was in the oil business or something. I'm pretty sure is what it was. And as you drive out, there's a few houses and there are fields on both sides. And once you leave that, it hits woods and there's no snake winding road. And all the way out there to the end, before you, probably about a mile and a half before you drop down over the hill. To the left is Pikes Ridge, and then you drop down over the hill is where there's a camping area down on Green River. Well, this is way back from this side of it. I get my four-wheeler, because we had four-wheelers, and I'd ride out there so far, and this ridge is long, probably 4 or 5 miles out there. So I'd ride my four-wheeler after about 4 miles and park it, because I didn't want to disturb anything on out, and I'd take and walk about 30 minutes out there and get my tree stand. And I was in a white oak flat, and it was where the road, I'm walking down the road. If you can picture in your mind, I'm walking down the road. It ain't real steep, and the road kind of turns back to the right, but this little old flat white oak ridge runs off to the left. Prime deer hunting area. I've killed a bunch of deer here, and everybody knew that was my spot. So I'd always go out there and hunt, and I always went in early in the morning, and when I hunted in the evenings, I'd always stay because completely black, couldn't see. You know, and all this time in my hand, I've replayed the things that's happened to me through the years, and, you know, and block it out because I've never had any experiences here. Okay. So one evening I was hunting there, and it's about 5:30. I'm sitting there in my tree stand, and I always like getting up about 25, at least 30 feet, because you getting by with more movement and the scent ain't as bad, you know, on the ground. So I'm way up there in this tree. I'm so high that I can see that no to where it kind of nose out and drops down and bears to the right, where I dropped off to the left, like I said. So I can see up there. I hear walking, and I mean, it's as plain as day. Crunch, 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 crunch. It's a human walking. It ain't no deer like a or a squirrel. My eyes are fixated on this. And this thing's coming down toward me, and it gets about 20 yards and turns. I'm facing it at 12 o'clock. This thing turns at the 3 o'clock position, and I'm not lying to you. I'm looking exactly where this thing is stepping. I can watch, because, you know, if your ears hear something, your eyes are automatically trained to look to where you're hearing it. I hear this thing leave the road, and it walks down through there off that ridge, and you could hear it walk off the end of that little finger ridge, which ain't 60 yards to my right. I thought, man, that's weird. Is my mom playing tricks on me, or is that? So I went back. I never said nobody, you know, to camp. I never said nothing about it. We're up there for 7 days. The next evening, guess what? 5 o'clock. Same thing. Same exact thing happens. Leaves the road. I'm watching where this thing's walking. And I mean, it's dry and crunchy. And this thing is closer. It's within 20 yards of my stand. I'm looking down. I don't see nobody. And these are heavy crunches, not little bitty crunches. Somebody say, oh, that's a ground squirrel. No, sir. And it walks by me again, walks off the end of the ridge. So this time I'm thinking, what am I witnessing here? Am I witnessing paranormal, or my mind playing tricks? And I thought, no, this is 2 days in a row. I go back to camp. I don't say a word. Get up next morning, go hunt the same stand. Nothing happens. The third day, I am not lying. Everything I love, the same exact thing. Within almost to the very exact minute. And when this happens, it happens for probably, I'm going to say 3 to 4 minutes. By the time it leaves the road, comes past me, goes off the end of the ridge. Well, this time I'm standing up. I got my little, you know, when people hunt, you got big binoculars and little ones. I've got the small ones, and I'm zoomed in, and I'm looking exactly where I'm hearing the crunching. And every now and then you can see like leaves move. And I'm thinking, you've lost your mind. Is this a snake under the leaves? And I keep thinking, this is the third time. You know, how can this happen? I don't understand. So this thing goes off out of sight. No scream, no holler, no, don't see anything, blah, blah, blah. Well, I don't stay to dark. I get out of my tree stand, and I'm hoofing it back to my four-wheeler. And by the time I get back to camp, it's dark. I said, boys, I need to talk to you about something. I tell them the story, and they start laughing at me. Ha, ha, ha. You're crazy. You're paranoid. You're hearing stuff. I said, no, I'm not. I said, all right. Matter of fact, I looked at one of my buddies. I ain't going to say his name. I said, come with me tomorrow? He said, I'll be glad to, because I ain't seen anything, and everybody always wanted to come out there where I was hunting because I always kill deer. He says, I'm going to hunt in the morning where my stand's at, and then at lunch, when we come in, I'll bring it out, and then that evening hunt, we'll go out there. I'll go with you. I said, okay, we'll go in early, so if we disturb anything, we got plenty enough time to calm down. So we eat lunch, and about 1:30, I said, all right, let's go. We'll go ahead and do that. So he follows me on his four-wheeler. We get out there, but I parked farther away this time. And he wants to ride all the way up there, and I said, I'm not doing it. But we get off. I'm having to get his tree stand. I've got my bow because I had it on the front of the four-wheeler and them little forks. I get it off, got my backpack on, got me some drinks and a snack and everything. And we go out, climb up in the tree. I show him to where I helped him get his spotted. He's about 60 yards dead in front of me. And I told him, I said, all right, like this tree here, if it's on this side of the tree toward you, you kill it. And if it's on that side, talking about a deer, And so he's okay. And so I get up. I got a climber, so when I get up, I'm going way up. I go up to about my 30 feet. This knucklehead ain't 15 feet off the ground. I'm looking at him, and I keep thumbing myself up, and he's shaking his head. No, he's scared of heights. And I finally got him up probably about 5 feet. He may have cracked the 20 feet level. By the time this is all done, it's probably, 2, maybe a little after. So we're sitting there for a while. I'm looking at my watch. He's sitting there, and, we're being real still. He's not as high as me. We're pretty much, that little knoll is level, and we're pretty much, but I'm kind of looking down at him just a little bit. And we keep sitting there. Here comes some does through. They're feeding around. He's looked at me like he's excited, wanting to shoot one. I just keep shaking my head no, because he's only 60 yards from me. He can see me because I'm up so high, deer can't see me. So I'm shaking my head no, and I could tell it was aggravating because he was wanting to kill something. I kept shaking my head no, because there's some big bucks in that area. And so here comes a 6-pointer. It's pretty good size, but it's on my side. I never stood up. It fed under me, and I could look over at him, and he was agitated as all get out. He was mad because I wasn't pulling back. But I wasn't there to hunt. I was there to prove a point. So time goes by, and I look at my watch. It's 15:05. And I could call him up, have him to get on the radio with me, and he'll tell you the same exact story. 5 o'clock or just a hair after, here it come. But this time he's closer to it than I am when it left the road. So I'm looking at my watch, and it's 5 o'clock, and I'm thinking he ain't reacting. I don't hear nothing yet. And about that time, we're face to face, like at 12 o'clock. All right, he's face to face at me looking, and he looks over at the 3 o'clock. I see him wheel that head around. And at first I thought, oh, it's probably a big deer. And I could see him looking. He was like straining. This thing keeps coming. It keeps walking. Now it's getting to where it's not beside him. It's starting to get toward the middle of us. We're both standing up in the tree stands at this point, pointing at each other, like to our ears and to each other. Now look, am I lying? And the expression on his face, he's about to flip out. And this is what's crazy. This is what happened this time. It gets in between us and it stopped. It had never done this before. Not ever. It was like a tape recorder. It kept playing. This time it didn't do that. It stopped. And I'm standing there and I'm thinking, oh my God, what is going on? And I'm looking at him. He is freaking plumb out. He's moving around, and I finally get into his attention. I'm telling him, hey, just hold on a minute. Maybe 30 seconds go by. This thing takes off and goes probably about 10 or 15 steps and stops again. And I'm looking through my binoculars to where, you know what I'm saying? If your ears, you know exactly the location to look. I don't see nothing. I pull my eyes back to him. He's got his binoculars there, but he's pointing. He's hysterically pointing. He ain't saying anything, but I see his arm just wailing over pointing. And so I zoom back in over there. You could see the leaf impressions moving. You could see leaves this time. But what I couldn't figure out, each time it was stepped, you'd see like leaves move, and like a leaf will move up like if a chipmunk's under it or something, or the wind. But these are footsteps. They're heavy footsteps. I see the leaves move, and I'm looking through my binoculars, and something catches me to my peripheral vision about 5 feet ahead. I see the other leaves move. I'm thinking, oh my God. And then I look again, it's the same distance apart. And this time it's at my, 12, it's at my 2 o'clock position. It'd be at his 10 o'clock position. And it stops again. And I can't figure this out. So I'm looking back at him and he's freaking out. He's reaching behind the tree, grabbing stuff. And I'm thinking he's going to fall out of the tree. And so at that time I made a whistle. When I whistled, this is what I don't understand either. When I whistled, this thing took off, but it wasn't walking. It was, but a heavy footstep and stuff. And I don't have my binoculars up anymore, but I'm looking down over the hill to where my ears are telling my eyes to look. I don't see nothing. I turn around and look back to him. He's done thrown all this crap off that tree. It's making all kinds of sound. He gets down, I don't know, probably about 10 feet, throws his bow. He's coming down that tree. He can't get down it fast enough. So, man, here I am. I ain't even ready to come down. So I start getting my stuff ready because I'm thinking that idiot's going to leave me. And now at this time, it's probably about 15, no more than 20 after 5. But I'm watching this idiot. He's running around like a chicken with his head cut off. Here I am 30 feet up in the tree. So I'm wiggling around. I get my little clip I hook on my bow where my backpack is, and I'm dropping it down. And it's burning my fingers to go down. And at about that time, I hear a crash over the hill to where this thing went. I have no idea what it was, but I looked at him, and I'm not lying. When he turned around and heard that crash, he looked down over that hill. His face just dropped. His skin went white. He took off at a dead run. He didn't go back up to the 4-wheeler. He's kind of quartering it off and left everything there. He didn't even have his tree stand or his bow. He took off running up through there. So, man, here I am coming down that tree like a chipmunk. I grab my stuff and I run over there to his and I grab his bow. I didn't grab his stand. My stand's still there. And I get up there and I'm hollering for him. I get, I don't know, maybe 80 yards away, and I'm hollering, "Hey man, stop, don't run." He don't answer. So like I said, and I walk further this time. So I don't know how you say that, not sprint walking, but walking real fast. I'm booking it up through there. I hear a 4-wheeler start up and tear out. He's gone. And by the time I get to the 4-wheeler, it's probably, I guess, getting, 15 to 6, getting close to it. And it's starting to get dark because we were hunting in the later part of the season where the time had changed and it was kind of cold out there. But anyway, I get on my 4-wheeler and I'm freaked out. So I'm barreling out through there too. And he had run out of the road and turned over. So I get up there to him. I said, "Man, are you okay?" He said, "Yeah, I'm all right." He said, "Yeah, I'm all right." I said, "Why'd you run?" He said, I don't know. He said, "That scared me." He said, "Jimmy, what is that?" I said, "Buddy, I don't know." I said, "I told you I wasn't lying." He said, "No, you wasn't lying." I get him fixed up and we go back to camp. And we're telling everybody what's going on. And one of my other buddies said, "I'll go out there tomorrow." I said, "I tell you what, you go out there. I won't even hunt. I'll go to your stand. You go to my stand." And so the next morning, I go out there and hunt my stand because it never happens. He went out there that evening hunting my stand. I hunted his. It happened to him. And he come back and we all stood around there at the camp that night and just watching them because the things that I've went through in my life, I don't know what you would call it, or I know what I've seen, Bigfoot wise or paranormal or whatever this was. But to sit there and watch my 2 buddies that laughed at me, it was kind of a relief to me to know, hey, I wasn't crazy. But both of them would not ever go back out that ridge again. Not ever. I hunted it a few more times. It never happened. But I'm telling you, this happened 4 days in a row, 3 by myself, 1 day with me and my buddy, and the next evening it happened to my other buddy. And so I really don't know what to say about that, but I just thought I'd throw that in there because that's high strangeness. I don't know how to comprehend something like that. You watch these shows and some of them say that Bigfoots can cloak. And I know what I seen twice. When I was on the river, I seen the one, it was probably 40 yards away. My encounter by myself on top of that mountain on the backside was 30 yards. And I mean, I could see every detail on this thing. And I haven't told anybody. I told my wife this evening, and I broke down when I told her because it all come rushing back. I thought I could tell her and I'd be fine. I didn't. Because when I replayed in my mind of that thing running off of that hill and coming up on that hillside, and my whole time I was thinking, that's a big buck. No, it wasn't. But what bothered me the most is how it went from where I was looking to where it showed itself is, I don't know. But I have never been so scared in my life. I have never been so scared. I can't explain it. And it's something that I've been wanting to tell for a long time, but you can't tell people this. They think you're crazy. But I'm telling you right now, these things are real. What are they? I do not know. This thing wasn't a chimp. It had human features. I had a bow. That's what made it worse for me. If I'd have had a gun, it wouldn't have changed anything. I couldn't have pulled up on it. I couldn't even pull my bow back. I'm telling you, when these things lock eyes with you, you don't look away. And the fear that sets over your body, you cannot explain. Time stands still. Things are playing at 1,000,000 times a second in your mind. You can't comprehend what's going on until finally, I guess, it just finally kicks in and it's over with. But only thing I can say is I know what I'd experienced. I've heard other people, and I told my wife, I said, I've got to share my stories because I've held this in for a long time, and it actually feels good to talk about it. I can't explain everything that's happened to me or what they are, or those footsteps that you could hear and then look through binoculars and see the leaves move. I can't explain that. But I know on everything that I love in this world, it is a true story. And I think a lot of times people go out and holler and scream and do this Bigfoot hunt and everything. There's nothing wrong with that. But I think the best way, if you want to encounter one, do your own thing. If you go out looking for them, you ain't going to find them. They'll show themselves when they want to. And I promise you, I don't care how many times you've been in the woods looking for these things. When you come within 30 yards of one, you'll see what I'm talking about. Because it is a life-changing experience. And for years, I had nightmares and had just problems thinking about this. Have I lost my mind? But no, I didn't. But people, until you hear one run through the woods, you have no idea. And if anybody ever listens to this that's had a Bigfoot encounter and they've run through the woods, you know what I'm talking about. It's a sound that you can't describe. It sounds like a herd of elephants running. I've never heard anything like it in my life. The next experience I want to talk about is in the same region. It's on the Big South Fork. In the springtime of the year, the lake always comes up and they hold the backwaters. So the Big South Fork, your walleye and all your other species will come up there and lay eggs and stuff. So me and my dad always goes down there walleye fishing, smallmouth fishing. So we go put it in under the bridge, which is just about 3-4 miles from my dad's house down off the mountain. And we put the boat in, and we always go upriver, and we get up into an area, which when my dad growed up is just right on top of this mountain. And as a kid, they would run off the end of the ridge down there and fish, hunt, whatever. But there was a place when they'd run off the ridge, they'd cross the old railroad tracks that run up to Mine 18, the old code camp. Now, this area I'm talking about is in the almost exact area that I started out on the show about them chasing them in the house. Well, across the river is a place the old timers called Sandbar Hollow. And my dad said as a kid, him and his uncle, or him and his brothers actually, sorry about that, would wade across the river and go squirrel hunting or deer hunting up this, they called it a holler, but it was a valley. It went up there pretty good. And my dad always talked about being up there squirrel hunting, and he could always tell that he was never alone. He could just always feel oddness about it, just weird, just felt like eyes was on you. And my grandpa told him about it, and all of his brothers had an experience. So we're up there fishing. I'm up front running the trolling motor, and we're in my dad's pro craft, And we're up there fishing. We probably got into this area. We probably wasn't in that area when we idled down and started fishing. I took over the trolling motor probably about no more than 10 minutes. We're on the side of the river that my dad lived on, and across the river was a place called Sandbar Hollow, and where all these old mining houses were at that was abandoned years and years ago. So we're there fishing, and all of a sudden I hear something coming through the trees, but it's coming from the other side of the river. You could hear it tearing through the leaves, and I mean it's up high. And there was a rock about the size of a softball that landed right behind the boat. And I could hear it come through the trees, and I was spinning around because I didn't know what it was, and it hit the water. My dad said, "What was that?" I said, "That was a rock." And we just sat there for a second. Really you couldn't see nothing over there, but that rock, it had to have traveled anywhere from 60 to 80 yards. But this thing come up through the trees and then down in the river right there's probably about, I'm going to say, 60 to 80 yards across. And it hits the water, and I spin around, and we was asking each other what it was. And then he got to telling me the story. That's Sandbar Hollow. That's the one I always told you about when we would hunt as kids and stuff. We'd always have problems. And this is in the same area that they were down there that night hunting. And them, the coon dogs got into it with something, swam the river and went home because they lived just on top of the ridge. And Dad was always talk about, after school, he said they'd run off into that ridge. And he said the further they got down, they'd be clothes scattered everywhere. By the time they hit the river, they'd be in their underwear and be swimming. But that area right there is exactly the place where he had talked about. And this rock comes from that area and really can't explain. There's nobody over there. You can't get over there. I mean, you can, but you'd have to go around and way up, and you'd have to walk 3 or 4 miles just to drop off in there. And so we know it wasn't nobody, and they ain't no human can throw a rock that big that far. So, I mean, I really don't know how to explain it. My dad, had always talked about, like I said in the first videos, all his life, and his dad would talk about being in that area and just strange things, hearing things screaming and hollering. And it's all in the same area that it's a few miles on up. Actually, the Big South Fork runs north, so it would actually be south was where I'd had my first encounter when I was 7 or 8 years old. And so we thought that was awful strange, but they ain't only one thing that it could be. I mean, there ain't nobody can throw a rock that far. And all up and down that river, there's just different spots. My dad would have stories about, hey, back in the day, this, old timers talked about this being chased out of the woods and hearing like women screaming and stuff. And this area is just, I don't know if it's paranormal, a lot of it or what, but it's just years of being in this area. There's just, if you go enough, you're going to encounter something. And it seems like we always did. The next story I would really like to tell is my nephew, my older sister. She only had one kid, and his name was Jake. And I took him up on the mountain. I really don't want to give the name because I'd like to keep these areas to myself. But this ridge, when you park your vehicle, it took about an hour, and I'm talking about an hour fast walk. And this ridge went out and dropped in, and it wouldn't be a half a mile from where I was 7 or 8 years old when it come off that mountain. So I'm right in a general area. But for years, we would always go up there and hunt and camp, and me and my uncles would talk, man, we're real close where all this happened. And you would walk out through there, and every time we would walk out this ridge, we would be paralleled on both sides. You'd walk, you'd hear something walking, you stopped, it would stop. It was always on each side of that ridge, but when you got out there close to the end, there was actually a gap that come up off the river on both sides of this snow. When you got up to the end, it kind of went up and then stopped, and it was a cliff line off the backside. But probably about 100 yards back this side, it would be a gap, and the deer would wear it out. But we would all have stories, go out through there, and it would take, like I said, an hour. Now, if you was slowing down, taking your time, it's an hour and a half walk. And we always kept it to ourselves because everybody in the family's just always done real good out there. It's just real good deer hunting. So this time I took my nephew up there, and I didn't tell him the area we was in because he was just young. He was just probably, I don't know, maybe I'm going to say 18, 19 years old. So we parked the truck, and where you park the truck, you just kind of bear to the right, and there's a little dip, and you can't see this ridge because it's so thick. It just looks like it goes out there a little bit. But if you keep going, it just keeps going. I don't know, I guess a mile and a half, 2 miles out there. So we get out, go through this little dip spot, and we get out there, and I'm seeing sign. And there's a lot of saplings, a lot of undergrowth in it. And I could see where the pine beetles had come through. There was a bunch of trees and stuff down, and you could tell where something had been tearing apart. Some of these pine trees were actually standing up, and you could tell were being ripped open, but you couldn't see no bear claws. So we're going on out through there, and it starts closing in, but there's a path, and I'm not lying. There's a path 3 to 4 feet wide where things are broke off. And I'm thinking in my mind, and Jake said about that time, he said, what would be breaking all these limbs off? I said, oh, it's just probably bear. So we're easing out through there, and the further I get, we're probably maybe 20 minutes from the truck by this time. And I'm creeping out through there, and I start looking, and you could see these saplings up anywhere from 5 to 7 feet. They're broke off, but they're all broke off pointing out this ridge. So I'm really starting to freak out because I'm thinking, well, they're still in here because I'm seeing sign. Because, if a bear is eating leaves or the bark or something off these little trees, they ain't no bigger around than the small end of a baseball bat. So there's no way it's a bear because he would ride them over. So anyway, we're easing on out through there, and I'm creeping, and I hear something in front of us. And I said, Jake, whatever we encounter, I said, whatever you do, do not run. I said, because if we encounter a bear, don't run. So I'm keep easing out through there, and I probably go maybe 30 yards in about a 15 or 20 minute span because I'm just creeping because I'm starting to notice all this sign. Well, I'm easing out through there, and I hear something in front of us. And I put my hand down behind me because we'd always make hand signals, and I taught him that, when to stop or something if I'd whisper to him. So we're standing there, and I'm looking to the left and right, and it wasn't as much on the left through this little thicket of these saplings, but it was mainly on the right. From 5 to 7 feet up, they were broke off, and these are fresh. I mean, these had been right before we got there the day before because they're still green. This was probably 2 months before bow season started, so this would have been in late August, maybe not even 1st September, because we was actually watching for snakes too. So we're easing on out through there, and I'm really starting to get worried. And he's getting nervous behind me because he keeps saying, he calls me Bub, Uncle Bub. He keeps saying, what's doing this? What's leaving all this sign? I said, it's probably a bear. I said, just, be quiet and just sneak here behind me. And I said, but whatever you do, if we encounter something, just don't run. So probably maybe another 10 minutes go by, and the path is still real wide. It's still, I don't know, between 3 and 4 feet wide. And I'm sneaking down, and it kind of narrowed in a little bit, but all these trees are still broke off on the right. And I'm looking down through, and I could probably see no more than 40 or 50 yards, and I see something, and it's black. So I stop, and I put my hand down, and I turn around and look at him. I said, there's something up there, and I don't know what it is. I said, I think it's a bear. So we're standing there, and you can hear it moving. And at this time in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, all these years, because I hadn't been to this spot in, I don't know, 10, 15 years. And I'm thinking in the back of my mind, here we go again. I mean, that's why I should have stayed away. But I was wanting to go up there and take my nephew because we'd always killed real nice bucks in this area. And I keep going out through there, and my brain's telling me, now, wait a minute. You're starting to see stuff that that they ain't only but one thing a bear, or out these little saplings, if it's a bear, they're going to ride it over. Why are these things broke off 5 to 7 feet up? And every one of them, this span is probably 50, 60 yards. And at this time, there's probably, I'm going to guess, anywhere from, I don't know, I'd have to ask him, maybe 8 to 12, 14 or something. But it's weird. They're all on the right side, but they're all bent over, and they're facing that way. And, I mean, this stuff is still green. But some of them, what was weird about it, they were bent over, but they were twisted. And I thought, there's no way if it's a bear, they're going to ride it over. So I'm standing here and I'm trying to process all this stuff in my mind. He's behind me and I can tell he's getting fidgety because I can hear him moving around, and I keep looking over my left shoulder and just reassuring him, if we see a bear, whatever you do, don't run. So we stand there a couple seconds, and I don't walk no more than 10 yards, and I don't know what I seen. And it was through that foliage, like I said, where this trail had narrowed down, but at this point it had probably got down within, I don't know, 30 to 36 inches wide, but it started out wider, but it got narrower. But all these trees are more, they're closer together is what I'm trying to explain. And about that time, I'm peeking down through there and everything, and I see something raise up. All this foliage through here, all these little saplings and stuff are anywhere from, I don't know, 8 to 12 feet. But I see something, like I said, 30, 40 yards in front of me. I see something come up. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, okay, this is a bear. And I'll lock up and freeze. He's behind me. He can't see nothing, but he can hear it. But as this thing starts coming up, it's not facing me. Its back's toward me. And I can't get a good detail, but in my mind, I'm thinking, holy crap, this ain't no bear. Because if this is a bear, we got black bear in here. They may go anywhere from 300 to 500 pounds, but at the tallest height, they may be 6 foot or maybe hit 7. Well, this thing is in the 8 to 12 foot range, and it comes up, and I could see the top of its head. So I start backing up. But like I said, it's not facing me. It's looking away. And I don't know if I can't say it was Bigfoot, but there's no way that it's a bear this tall. And so I'm turning around looking at my nephew Jake, telling him don't run. Well, I turn around and look, he's done gained 15 yards on me going the other way. And I was hollering, don't run, don't run. He's getting it. He's fast walking. And I'm backing up, and I'm trying to keep my eyes on this thing. And about that time, it drops down. Well, at that time, I turned around. I wasn't really running, but I got up there to him, and only thing we had was 2 big walking sticks that I always carried in the back of my truck, in case, mainly just for walking. But if you encountered something, maybe you'd have something to fight with. But this thing here, when it stood up, like I said, all the foliage that we was in was 8 to 12 feet, and this thing was in that range there. And I just kept thinking this, here we go again. I mean, I stayed away for all these years, and I no more than get out of the truck 20, 30 minutes in, and here I am again. And so when I turn around and see he's not at a dead run, like running for your life, but he's getting out of there. I mean, he's getting it. And I'm hollering at him. I told him, let's just get out of here. Just go, go, go. And we get up there to the truck, and he was asking me, what was that? I said, did you see it? He said, yeah, I could see something standing up. He said, was that a bear? And I didn't want to scare him to death. I said, yeah, it was probably a bear. But in the back of my mind, what I'd seen on the river as a kid, and then at 7, 8 years old, and then what I seen when I was 21, 22, how do you tell a kid that monsters are real? And me and my wife's been talking about this the last couple of days, and it's really bothered me. I've had a couple of nightmares over it because, when I told my oldest sister, I said, it's hard to explain to anybody that these things are real. And you see it on TV and stuff, how the movies are, they've got these things on YouTube and stuff, and you can tell they're fake. Because what I seen, I can watch something, I'll say, nope, it ain't even close to what I seen. But how do you explain that stuff like this is real? And all the years through there, all of my dad he just turned 79 actually yesterday. And he'd had a massive stroke 2 years ago, and he can't walk and stuff, and it really bothers him. But I told him about the podcast and everything on YouTube, and my oldest daughter went over, and he had the remote in his hand and was smiling from ear to ear and shaking his head. And I've talked to my uncles, and they're all like, yeah, you told it dead on. But, it's what I'm talking about. How do you explain that these things exist when other people look at you like you're crazy? But the whole time that we've been in these places and really never paid no attention to it until you start being paralleled by something that would walk and stop when you'd stop. And I think a lot of times when people encounter these things, bluff charge them and stuff, I think that they've come close to the family part of them, or they're hunting, And I think a lot of times that they'll just try to herd you out, or they're curious and following you out and seeing if you're going to leave. And like I said, that day I took him up there, I just kept seeing the signs of it over and over and over in the back of my mind. I keep thinking, God almighty, I stayed away for 10 or 15 years. And as soon as I come back, not 30 minutes, and I'm right back in it again. And you just have to realize that they've been here longer than we have. And if they wanted to hurt people, that they would, then you got to block that out of your mind. I know it's hard at times, and it's just mind blowing and mesmerizing. Just listen to all of my dad's and all of my uncle's experiences through the years on that river and on those mountains. And I mean, they're in there. And some of these places, I don't think a white man's ever walked, maybe Indians, but a lot of these places, these valleys and ridges and stuff, if you can get into them, you'd be a 3, 4, 5 day hike in there, and you're miles and miles and miles from nowhere. And so these things are in there, and it's just, you have to realize if they want to hurt you, they would, because my 30-yard encounter, I'm looking at this thing and we've locked eyes, and I never will forget. And it keeps rushing back on me, hearing it coming off that ridge. But I've got some uncles that live in Ohio. That's where I was born at and moved back to the county. But all my dad's family is up there in Sydney. Well, they hunt a place in southern Ohio. I don't want to give the name because, they've got a cabin down there, and I don't want to do anything to jeopardize that, having people coming and messing with them. But I've heard these stories for years, and they hunt there in southern Ohio, and they used to take a camper down there, and I think they build them a cabin now. But there's this area that there was a big old deep holler down there, and they all talk about how there was an old home place that had just basically fell in. And they started noticing every time that each one of them would go down there, they all wouldn't go because they'd all split up, hunt themselves. But one of the members of my uncles and them, well, he's my dad's first cousin. I call him Uncle Rick. But when they would get down in there and hunt, and if they come back, if anybody had been down in there, these things would come up at night and throw and scream and holler and hit the side of the cabin, throw stuff. And they got to noticing that if they stayed away from the old house, they wouldn't have any of these episodes. And this has been going on for years and years. So they all started learning if they stayed away, they never would encounter stuff down there. They would hear stuff. But if they got around this old house place, sure enough, you can bet on it. If you was down there that morning or that evening and you went back to the cabin at dark, you was going to get a visit that night. And they're out in the middle of nowhere. And these things would come up and, like I said, scream and holler and beat on the cabin, throw rocks. And my Uncle Rick, I call him Uncle Rick, I've watched him tell this story multiple times. And each time he tell it, he gets worked up, bouncing around, hair standing up on his arms, scared to death. And, I mean, you can watch people that tell true stories because you can see the fear in them like I had. And if anybody has never encountered one of these things, you have no idea what we're talking about. I mean, it's hard to admit that these things are real. But when you see them 30 yards like I did, even as a kid, 7, 8 years old, and I was in my early 20s, I mean, it's stuck for me. You're with me for years. And when I seen your podcast and started listening to all these guys, the same thing, hadn't talked about it in 30, 40 years, but they was getting tired of living a lie of knowing that these things are real. And I had to come on and get it off my chest because I couldn't hold it no more, because it was starting to bother me. It's staying agitated. I was having bad dreams at night. And it's just been that way for, 30-something years. But that was in southern Ohio that all them happened. This is all of my dad's family. And it's kind of weird, but everybody in my dad's family now on my mom's side, they didn't hunt and fish like my dad and them did, because they were brought up down there right on the river. Like I said, they'd get out of school, they'd run off over the hill, and he'd laugh about it and said all them boys, they'd be ripping clothes off. Said they'd be clothes scattered a half a mile down that path. By the time they got to the river, they'd be in their underwear and diving in. But all up and down through there. And probably the last story that I've got, it was me and my Uncle Walt and my Uncle Mike. This has probably been in the late 80s, and I'd forgot about this. We had all went back down in there right close. We didn't get exactly right in there where we was at when we had our encounter, but we was no more, I know we was less than a mile away. So we go down in there and we ride our four-wheelers and we camp. We find a big old rocket. It fell off a cliff, but it wasn't in the cliff line, but it had a big old ledge on it, so we camp under it. And so we get down there that night and get set up, and we was going to go down there and fish on the river. Well, we was catching crawfish and minnows. We had minnow baskets and stuff. So here we are laying around. We try to go to bed 10, 11 o'clock at night, and all of us are just restless and everything. So we get up and we decide to go down in there, and here we are miles from anywhere. We're down here. I'm on my hands and knees wading in this creek. It's probably 2 or 3 inches deep, catching crawfish. And behind us is a bigger creek. And so we're down there crawling around, and we've all got, lights and stuff and headlamps and this and that. But I'm on my knees and I'm catching the crawfish, throwing them in the bucket. And then my Uncle Mike said, "Hang on a minute, I hear something." And you could, and it's this area I'm talking about's got a lot of holly bushes. It's real thick when you get around creeks. If a lot of people know it, it gets real thick. Well, I'm on my hands and knees, and something jumps out in the creek with me about, I'm going to say 50 to 75 yards. And I've told this story to my family. And here I am on my hands and knees. My uncles are behind me, and I'm looking up through there. This thing is 50 to 75 yards down in the creek, but this thing's eyes are an amber color, and they're not no more 2 feet off the ground, but them things would drop to right down on the water, close to the water, and close its eyes. And so we'd drop our lights, and my uncle was saying it may be a big panther or mountain lion. So here I am. I'm on my hands and knees, and I'm wet. It's in the summertime. It's warm. We're having to watch for snakes and this and that. And then, like I said, we would throw the lights back up. This thing would be trying to raise up. And I was trying to get up, and my uncle having his hand on my back. He said, "Hang on." He said, "As long as we keep our light on it," he said, "you're all right." Well, no, I'm not all right. I'm on my hands and knees in the creek. And so finally we keep watching this thing, and we're starting to back up. I get up on my feet, and we're backing away from this. And my uncle, he's done drawed his weapon. But like I said, this thing would close its eyes. This was what was really scary about it. And it's black. I mean, blacker and black. When the light would hit it, you could see it was black. You couldn't really see nothing because where the hollies and stuff was down at the edge of the creek narrowed. And the closer we were to the river, of course, it was wider. So I finally get up on my feet, and we're backing up. And we just keep backing up. Well, this thing bails up out of the creek, and you could hear it run up through them hollies, just ripping out up through there. And we're all looking at each other, and we're scared to death because here it is, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. So we kind of brush it off and don't think nothing about it. So behind us, we got to look into where there's a bigger creek. We started seeing some brown trout. They had stocked there. So here we are, couldn't sleep. We're throwing rocks. We're building a dam. And we've got these brown trout, caught up in this little, I don't know, maybe 20 feet wide, 40 feet long little pool of water. We dam it up, and we're wading up above it. There's little bitty pockets of water, and we're catching these fish, and really not catching with their hand, but if you get close enough, you could splash them down in there, and the other one would grab it, knock it on off in there. And we thought, heck yeah, tomorrow when we get up, we'll come down here, and we'll get all these trout. We'll fillet them up, and we'll have lunch with them. So this goes on for probably about a couple hours, and we could keep hearing something on the hill. And my uncles, they're saying it's probably a big cat or something. But what scared me the most, I was on my hands and knees, and I'm looking 50, 75 yards up, and this thing's eyeball level with me, and I'm probably 24 to 30 inches off the ground. It's eyeball level with me, and you could see it. He'd close one eye, then he'd close both eyes. You turn the light away for maybe 5 seconds, and when you come back, the eyes would be there again. And then they would close. But like I said, sometimes one or both would close. So with all this is playing in the back of our mind, and we probably throw anywhere from 2 dozen of them rainbow and brown in this little pool of water. And we're thinking, heck yeah, we'll come back tomorrow, and we'll get these things and we'll cook them up. Well, we get back on our four-wheelers, and it's probably about a 20-minute ride. We're riding through there and get back up to camp. finally go to sleep. And it was probably 10 or 11 o'clock the next day. We go back down there. All these fish are gone. There's pieces of them laying around everywhere. And whatever it was had weighted down the stream. And if it had been sand around it, we could have seen tracks. But it was like a creek rock, small creek rock and pebbles. It wasn't sandy. It was more rocky, but real fine rock. But here we had all these trout dammed up here, and there's pieces of them laying everywhere. And part of the dam was tore open, and my uncle said, oh, something's come through here, probably a coon, and washed them out. And my other uncle said, no, I don't think so. You know, coon ain't going to move rock out of the way. But we were right down in that same area that all this stuff has been going on. But here's 24 or so trout gone. There's pieces of them laying everywhere. And we couldn't figure it out. So we go on down, I think it's a couple days later or something. We're still down in there. And I think my one uncle left. Yeah, because it was just me and my Uncle Mike left. Or maybe, no, I'm wrong. I'm sorry. This trip, nothing else happens. But me and my Uncle Mike, we ride our four-wheelers back down in there a couple months later. Well, instead of staying under that cliff, we go down there to a place called Shiprock. And that's where I had my first experience. And there's areas in there called Difficulty and Troublesome Creek. Well, at Troublesome Creek, there's some huge boulders. And where the water comes through, it's not really rapids, but it's real swift, kind of white water where it swings in around there. So we're laying here on the rocks instead of camping under the cliff. They was given nice weather, and it was still in the summertime. So we camp on these rocks. Well, we caught minnows and everything, and up to then hadn't had no problems. And that night, we could hear the frogs. Man, they were just ringing and roaring in there. You couldn't hardly sleep. And this rock slanted, and we're in our sleeping bags and stuff. We're laying there. And then across the river, something screams out. And me and him both, and we don't even have a light on. But like I said, you have to climb up this rock, so we wasn't really worried about nothing getting to us. And about that time, something across the river screams. And I come up out of my bag because I'd heard that scream before, and I looked at my Uncle Mike. I said, what in the world was that? He said, that sounded like a big cat. And about that time it did it again. I looked at him. I said, that ain't no cat. He said, no, it ain't no cat. So we're sitting here and we're listening to this thing, and you can hear something moving back and forth across the bank over there. And I told Mike, I said, now look, you remember years ago when I was a kid, I said, this stuff happened down there. And he said, yeah, I remember. I said, well, come morning time, I don't want to stay around here no more. And I really don't. So we stay up all night and don't even get no sleep, because this thing, you could hear it move up and down the river, never come across, but you could just hear it, and it would sound like a woman screaming. And a lot of people say, well, that's a mountain lion or a panther or whatever. And they say, I've heard bobcats scream. This wasn't no bobcat. I can't explain it. But all these experiences I've had, my dad, all my uncles, all this stuff is in this same region. And like I said, I stayed away from this one spot for 10 or 15 years, and I ain't out of my truck in 30 minutes. And here we go again. I'm right back in the thick of it. And me and my wife went out looking and everything. So I done seen more sign just a few days ago of cedar trees, one 8-inch diameter and one probably about 3 or 4 inch diameter. They're snapped off 5-6 feet up, and they're pointing, coming off the end of this ridge and to where it goes down into that farm we hunted where I had my 30-yard experience. So I'm going to go back at it, because I always like waiting to let everybody else hunt and get it out of their system. And come late November, December, you got the woods to yourself, and that's what I'm kind of waiting on. But I don't know. I don't know what tomorrow holds, but I know I'm going to go back. And like I said, just a few days ago, I go back to this area, and there it is again. And I don't know. Maybe someday I may have a new story coming up soon. I don't know, but that's my stories, and they're the truth.
Well, that's it for tonight's show. If you've had a Bigfoot sighting and would like to be a guest, please go to mybigfootsighting.com and let us know. Thanks for listening. Have a great night.
Seen a bunch of rundown, no-horse towns where the church is the backbone, loves and the plow, and the 5-string melodies grooving, with the farmland rows where the roots run deep, beyond the noise of the busy streets. where the songs of the South are soothing. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Yeah. The sound of a memory brings me back to the bluegrass playing on my dad's 8-track. His pickup man had been through it, getting through the day on Scruggs and Skags, booking hay bales to those Tennessee jams. There's no other way that I do it. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Yeah. Something going backwards and double time, getting to the soul and the drumming, low Kentucky style. Those are the anthems strumming out, country boy living. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Pace of the city life drives me wild. The only tune is the cars rushing by, with the bass on the stereos booming. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Yeah. Something going backwards and double time, getting to the soul and the drumming, low Kentucky style. Those are the anthems strumming out, country boy living. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Something going backwards and double time, getting to the soul and the drumming, low Kentucky style. Those are the anthems drumming out, country boy living. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm, ride chicken porch swing, mama's best sweet tea kind of sound.